everyone. First off, just want to thank Mayor and Council for allowing us to have the work session tonight. We're going to talk a little bit about a mural project, but also more about some public art projects. And if you've seen through the staff report, this project has taken a little bit of, I'll call it a pivot, in what we want to discuss today with Mayor and Council, and is going to center more around some policies. Out of the mural project, what we have found as a team is that what we're missing from a staff perspective is kind of clear direction from Mayor and Council about how we should be bringing projects forward for consideration and approval from a variety of different sources. Could be grant funding, could be a city-funded project, it could be a donation to the city. And as we've kind of gone through this process of bringing the mural project forward, which we'll talk about, we've really realized that what we'd like to talk about is not only the mural project, but also some policy considerations from Mayor and Council, and to get some direction from this group on how you would like us to proceed forward. Before I get too far into the presentation, I wanted to introduce Gila Sanders, who has joined the collective team most recently with our Art Fund and is the executive director, and just give her a chance to introduce herself. She has a couple of slides that she'll be going over as well today. So I'll turn it over to Gila just for a quick introduction, and then we'll jump back to Becky, who's also going to help me. So Gila.
Hello, everybody. Gila Sanders from Roswell Arts Fund. I've been on board for about 2 months at this point, and I think in this room quite a bit. So I'm very excited to see all of this coming together, and it's been really great to see the amount of collaboration that has already been taking place between Roswell Arts Fund and city department and city in general. I think the step toward the arts policies and the donation policies is a really important one, so that we can continue to implement the public art master plan and make it smooth, so that everybody is on page. In the end, I think we are all working toward something that is very exciting for City of Roswell and that has a lot of support throughout the community. So I'm thrilled to be here and to work with all of you.
So real quick, let's sort of set the stage, maybe, of what sort of got us here in the first place to talk about public art and art and culture and what that means for Roswell. So in 2014, just as a reminder, the city accepted and approved the Imagine Roswell Art and Culture 2030 Master Plan. And within that master plan, there were some priorities set specifically focused on public art, on growing art and cultural programs, on highlighting art and cultural programs, on focusing on key corridors. And this is sort of the master plan that within cultural services, within Rec and Parks, we really use as our roadmap and as our sort of guiding map as to what are we doing and why are we doing it and how are we doing it and how is it impacting what these priorities were back in 2014. And of that, there was about 1,400 people surveyed in this master plan. And of that, there was a strong voice among community leaders and stakeholders and residents that wanted Roswell to be seen as a more arts destination, a more creative and artsy place to live, work, and play. And of that, there was a strong opinion of the city being a leader in public art initiatives as well. And one of the priorities outlined in this plan was to create a public art master plan or a public art program. So the public art master plan came out of this plan, and they kind of go hand in hand together. And I'm going to let Gila talk about that one for just a second.
So Roswell Arts Fund came in 2015, and it was established as the designated art agency for City of Roswell. Thank you. And was commissioned to do a public art master plan, which again was initiated in 2015, created during 2016, and then presented to City Council and Mayor in 2017. So after that, what went into the public art master plan was a great deal of community community involvement. There were about 1,900 people who participated in a number of different ways. About 400 people came to different gatherings that talked about the public master plan. About 350 students were involved in this, and also there was a survey that went out, and over 800 people responded to that. So again, overall, about 1,900 people within Roswell shared their voice and their opinion about the different influences that art could give into the city, and what they perceived as the priorities. And so out of that came the master plan. And in the master plan, there are a number of priorities that are indicated, some projects and some programs, and in particular, an accent on certain entry points to the city, and so how to fortify them with art and how to make them really a statement for people coming into Roswell that they can recognize Roswell right away, to give more of an identity to city of Roswell. Murals were another priority that was set out, functional art, and so crossroads, bike racks, ways to really combine the artistic identity of the city with safety and concerns coming out of transportation. And so, again, the master plan was presented in 2017, and since then, Roswell Arts Fund, along with the, particularly the Recreation and Parks Department, but a number of different city departments, implemented the master plan with 3 different programs. So we can see, I think, in the next slide. So far,
This one's yours. There you go.
So we have, we're now in the 5th year of the Art Around Roswell Sculpture Tour. That is a program that brings together a number of different organizations, and there's an RFP that goes out. This year we had over 80 different proposals coming to Roswell Arts Fund, and then we picked 10 sculptures that will be on display starting in April. Artistic bike racks, we just inaugurated this last month, and we have 4 more that we're going to be installing by the end of the year. The first one, this piece is called Unity, went to Northwood Elementary, and it's installed right in front of the school. And one of the great things when we went to the installation, not the installation, but the ribbon cutting for it, the principal was talking about the fact that it is used as a bike rack some, but most importantly, it's just a welcoming piece that welcomes people as they come into the school in the morning. And so it has completely changed the dynamic of the carpool line. So now the teachers are piping music into the carpool line, and you see teachers and children who are dancing the way into the school. And so it has given a completely different vibe to a routine that otherwise can be quite stressful for parents and kids and teachers alike. And then the other great benefit of this installation is the fact that the artist that created this piece is now in connection with the school, and it just went in November twice to the school to have a workshop, one with the teachers and one with the students, to talk about what it means to be an artist and how the artistic process goes, how he comes up with his inspiration, and how he creates the pieces that he creates. And so there are much longer lasting effects to some of these pieces that we're putting around the city. And then lastly, Artists Around the Table, which is an opportunity for representatives of city departments and artists to come together and look at different projects that are slated for the coming year or two, and see where synergies are possible for collaboration between, again, art and urban planning. So this is one of the main pieces of placemaking, is this integration of the arts in urban planning. So this is a very unique program, by the way, one that is that a lot of cities inspire to, and I think it's just a fantastic thing that Roswell actually has it in place, and it's working.
So some further implementation highlights that have been pulled from guidance by Imagine Roswell, Art and Culture 2030, as well as the Public Art Master Plan, is expansion in art programming. So we've done that with the Forge at Art Center West with our blacksmithing programs. We've done pop-up temporary art installations, as well as activated the space that surrounded those pop-up art We've installed some functional art with the Arts Fund with bike racks, also the Heart of Roswell bench, which is a mosaic, which was one of the prioritized types of art to be seen around the city within the plans. We continue to expand upon our cultural celebration, including Roswell Roots. And then one of the priorities was also focusing on the Cultural Arts Center and performing arts venues. So we've taken that, and what we can do is we've invested in the Cultural Arts Center, new sound equipment, new lighting equipment. We're getting ready to put in new chairs. So we're really trying to invest in the Cultural Arts Center and bring it back to life a little bit in terms of maintenance over there, and needs to really make it a adequate performing arts space for the community organizations it serves, and the diverse amount of art that it does bring in through the door as well. So with all that said, still going off of the Cultural Arts Center, the sort of subject that brought us to this presentation is taking all of the priorities that have been listed within both of those plans to come up and start figuring out a mural program for the city of Roswell, as murals was one of the top prioritized types of art that people wanted to see in and around Roswell. So we looked at the Cultural Arts Center as one of the facilities that's full of vibrancy. On most weekends, you have a large amount of people coming in and out of that building. It's offering a diverse line of programming, but that vibrancy and that energy and that atmosphere that's been created on the inside doesn't necessarily reflect on the outside. It's in a great location. It's in one of the prioritized corridors within the Public Art Master Plan, but sometimes it's seen as a municipal building for paying taxes or city hall. We have people thinking it's the library. So we thought it would be a really good opportunity to define the vibrancy of this building, both on the outside, and give it definition. So when somebody's coming to this building, they understand what it is and what they're about to experience within that building. And in addition to that, we wanted to make sure that we had parameters set for what a mural would be representative of on this building. So we came up with concept parameters in partnership with the Arts Fund, and we had an art consultant sit at the table with us as well to best understand what a mural could look like on this building, and what architectural parts of this building would it be fighting against, would it complement, where could we set the parameters to know that a mural would look good and vibrant on the outside of this building.
So as I was kind of getting prepared to bring the mural item forward, what I found was just in my conversations with mayor and council as we were prepping this item, that there were just a tremendous amount of questions of who had approved the project, why this project, where was it coming from, what process did you go through in order to get it to the point of bringing it to committee. And as I went back and looked at what our process was, it was really just from a historical context of what have we done before, and there were really no policies set up to push us forward on how we develop project parameters, how we develop project recommendations, how do we move them through a recommendation process, and ultimately to mayor and council. And so this was the process that we developed that was out of our experience, that also drove us essentially to this meeting of looking to mayor and council to have a conversation about policy, because one currently doesn't exist. So we developed the project concepts, as you just heard from Becky. We took those concepts to the Recreation Commission, to the Historical Preservation Commission, and then we were getting ready down here in stage 4 for council authorization. And the reality is that in developing the process this way and kind of coming through it, what we realized is that we need to have some additional conversations in this council authorization piece earlier in the process so that people understand what's happening, how are we moving through the process, and how do we make recommendations. And that's what brings us here today, is these two policies. Thank you. these two policies that are in your packet. One is a public art policy and the other is a donation policy. We've realized that as you look back at some of the items that both Gila and Becky had talked about, we have various public projects that are going on. Some of them are donated to the city through our Art Around project, where we'll have temporary sculptures that are in our community, and then somebody will want to buy one and donate them to us. And we don't really have a policy on how do we tackle that donation and bring it forward for acceptance to mayor and council. We also don't have a policy that would drive us down a very specific process in which we would make recommendations to mayor and council for permanent or temporary art on public property. And so in that, we've included some draft policy recommendations, and I've updated kind of the process that we would go through out of those policies should we move them further. And in stage one right here, this is relatively the same, where staff would develop a concept, but then we would move it forward at a high-level presentation to council with a request to move forward in the process of vetting this project further. And you can see here that that conversation happens earlier in the process than it did previously as we were moving forward in this mural concept. And the best example I can give you is just last week we brought forward a grant recommendation for the Bloomberg grant. And it essentially defined this process of stage 1 and 2 because we had to come in and present in order to get authorization to submit a grant, which was the funding portion of that project. And so what we're looking forward in our policies is essentially to make what in some instances are required of different funding sources part of the policy so that we would be consistent in what we do. Once we would move forward and then into stage 3, which is this art selection panel, which is done by our designated art agency, which is the Art Fund, then that would be the formation of various recommendations here in stage 4. And then we would bring that back to mayor and council in stage 5 for a final project authorization and then moving forward. So in the case of the mural project, we would bring a very high-level concept here in stage 1 and stage 2, talk about potential budget allocations that are available from city funding or other funding, and then get authorization to move forward in the process. What that does for us is it creates an opportunity to have a dialogue with mayor and council that we're aligned with your policy recommendations and budget recommendations before we get too far in the planning process. Similarly, in the donation policies that are currently drafted, and again, these are just in draft form, but a proposal would come forward. This is potentially, I'll use the Art Around, for example, that somebody wanted to purchase a sculpture that's currently temporarily displayed in one of our parks. And that either the art agency would come forward, which would be the Art Fund with a donation request. They would work with the department. There would be a selection panel that would be convened. Again, that is done through the designated art agency. And then recommendations to department head, and then we would bring those recommendations forward to mayor and city council. Right now, in our current process, is we don't have that vetting and that review of something that would want to be donated to the city. It's not defined, and so we allow the project to kind of define the process. And in this case, what we're looking for is making recommendations to allow the policy to define the process that we would go through. And then upon formal approval, then we would have some agreements that would be put in place, and then the installation of the project. I'm going to stop there. Do you have any questions, just kind of how we've kind of gotten to this point? So I know it's a little bit different than proposing a mural project, and I will say, you know, the reason that we're here at the policy level discussion is because we really realize that that's what we're looking for from a guidance perspective, so that we can be consistent. As I look back and then also look forward at all the projects that could be potentially coming, that consistency in process is so important from a staff perspective and from our community perspective, so that we know what to expect in moving forward and how to get something reviewed and approved.
I've got several questions. When you refer to the master plans, I know 2017 that plan was not adopted by council.
The public art master plan.
Yes. So the first presentation in, was it 14 or 15? I wasn't here then. Was that adopted by mayor and council?
The 2030 master plan? The Imagine Art.
Yes.
Yes, that one, yes.
That one was adopted.
Yeah.
So when we refer to a master plan, are we referring to ones that haven't been adopted by council and ones that have been adopted by council? I mean, so my question is, because there's a master plan that, and I know that in 2017, one of the issues we had, it had some very aspirational funding requests in there, and we were very, very cautious not to adopt it because we were not in favor of many of the recommendations in that plan. So when you get your marching orders, are you considering that plan that has never been adopted by mayor and council as a plan to move forward in the city?
So what we consider from a staff perspective is we consider the adopted plan, which is the Art and Culture 2030 plan. That is the one that is approved and adopted. And so if you were to see a presentation come forward, you would see two different plans referenced, and that one would be the adopted plan, and one would be, I believe the term that is used is accepted. It's been reviewed and accepted by the city. And you would see those two very distinct measurements in that presentation, that we would reference the art master plan as there are recommendations that are included that this project would be consistent of, but it's not our guiding force behind how we're making recommendations. We fall back on the one that's adopted by mayor.
And that was my concern, that you weight evenly a plan that was adopted and a plan that was not adopted.
And we would
Right.
not.
Okay, and then another question I've got is, we're talking about public property.
Correct.
And so whether we're talking about painting a mural on City Hall or painting a mural on the Cultural Arts Center, I personally don't consider the Recreation Commission having a voice in that. These buildings are owned by the citizens of Roswell, and I think that the final answering authority should be mayor and council. I'm not quite certain why there would be a recommendation from the Recreation Commission on a public building that's owned by the citizens. I'm just...
So in the policy, and again, the policies are just in draft form, and we can take guidance from this body on how you want to tackle it, is generally the Recreation Commission has made recommendations on park property. The Cultural Arts Center in particular was put under the authority of the Recreation Commission on a policy level a couple of years ago. And so that's a building and a facility that kind of lives in both worlds. It kind of is part of the policies associated with the Recreation Commission, but it's still an administrative building, and it's kind of one of those kind of gray areas where it sits in the middle. From a park perspective, what we included in the policy was just that, a recommendation that would be brought forward to mayor and council with the ultimate authority resting with mayor and council. But the policy can be adjusted how we need it to be and what this body is comfortable with. We also have distinctions in the policy itself with temporary art, permanent art, and temporary, long-term and permanent. There's 3 art definitions within the policy. And with the temporary art, those are intended to be short-term, potentially less than 12 months. And so there's potentially a lot of those types of projects that could end up, especially in park facilities, and there currently are. And so we wanted to make sure that we were being respectful of your time and your calendar in pushing some authority where it was appropriately vested. And again, that's a sliding scale that this body has absolute authority on where you would like to place those recommendations or that approval process and how you'd like to go about doing it.
And then I have one other question right now, and that has to do with the parameters on the art. Communities that are very successful with public art tend to have a cultural connection to the art. They tend to have industry within their communities that are donating the art, whether it's a foundry or whatever the case may be. Do we have any policies regarding the subject matter of the art? So, for example, let's say my husband is feeling very generous and he wants to donate a 30-foot tall sculpture of me to the city of Roswell. Well, I have a feeling that wouldn't go over too big.
Everybody stand down.
So what, and so for example, you might have, we just named a street after a very important community member of ours that passed away. What are these policies? Because, we're going to get into a sticky wicket because the subject matter is going to be offensive to someone. So how do we deal with that?
From the selection panel process, and I can tackle it from policy.
Yes. So in the selection panel, so first of all, I wanted to say, and mindful of the fact that the public art master plan has not been adopted, it was very much informed by community, and in it there are a number of policies that were drafted, and again, not adopted, but that served as best practices as we were creating policies to present. And so the policies that you will see are not exactly the ones that are in here. They're more detailed and they're more customized for what we need. But we do have a process that we've been following in a very consistent way that, again, refers back to best practices. As far as the art selection, we always want to make sure, and this is going to be in the policies, we always want to make sure that there's a number of stakeholders that are represented. And so when we put together a panel, an art selection panel, there will always be community members, departments, all of the involved departments that have something to do with the art piece or the location where the art piece is planned to be put in place, are going to be represented. We have businesses and, of course, the designated art agency. And so there's at least 5 different buckets of constituents that need to be present in order to create that selection in a way that is very consistent with what the public wants and what City of Roswell is asking for. I think the idea of having some values that tie back to the community is very important, and one of the pieces is most definitely community identity. And so there are definitely a number of criteria that need to be followed, and a number of criteria that, for example, in the Art Around panel, we always keep in mind. I'm not sure that it's not necessarily local artists, for example, but when there is a possibility of having, tie into values that are representative of the city and that are more local, I think that's something that we should definitely keep in mind.
I would like to see more on this policy because I'm just very concerned about it. I know not too long ago we had a little bit of a dust-up with the dedication of an art piece that was fought with issues from the school board, the local school, as well as the Arts Fund Board. There was quite heated debate on it. And so I'm not seeing this policy, I'm not comfortable with it.
Okay.
And I think that we really need to look at that.
So is the criteria that you would like
Yes.
to have? Okay.
So just for reference, it's the section 3 that's the criteria. That's where we have essentially kind of the evaluation criteria that we have embedded in the policy that reviews plans of artwork. It looks at the inherent quality of the artwork itself, the structure of the artwork, the reasonable diversity, that needs to get relooked at from a policy perspective on how we're evaluating art and bringing recommendations forward.
And dedication policies.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Did you have any others, Mayor?
Not right now, thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you for those. And so, kind of, as you've just heard in the discussion, it's how do we create that meaningful path forward for staff, for the community, and that's where we've kind of centered back on these policy recommendations that as we know that there's going to be more projects that will come forward that potentially could be donation projects of a 30-foot statue. They could be other projects that move forward in the community through our Art Around or other initiatives that come up as part of these recommendations. And before we tried, from a staff perspective, it seemed wise to kind of pause on the mural project and say, okay, how do we go about the process first? What are those policies that are really driving these projects forward, and how do we do that so that we have clarity both from our council as the policymakers, but also from staff that are trying to carry out those policies. So with that, I'll stop. We have this recommendation that we would like to move these policies forward, but really have the questions that you've obviously posed to us now through the mayor's questioning, but from others is what is it that you need, and is this the right direction? Is this a need that you see in the community, and are we moving forward in the right space? And then if we are, and we want to move these forward in the committee, what more do you need from us in order to make that happen?
I do. I thank you guys very much for, working together and coming with these recommended policies. I do, just want to clarify, as you said, Gila, that the 2017 Public Art Master Plan was based on a lot of input from the community and a lot of the desires of the community to see a strong public art presence in the city. Within that plan, there were a number of policies and processes that were left for, mayor, council, and our staff to kind of hone out some of the details. And I think that's where they are. I think this is a really good place to start with the public art selection process, because I think once we get that honed out and address some of your concerns and concerns that other council members may have, then we can move towards, some other policies for percent for arts, whether from public and private sources. So, again, thank you for bringing this forward and for all the work that you all have done. One particular detail that I just wanted to check on, just one more on that one. In stage one, where the staff develops conceptual project, I would see that that's not just staff, but that's also the designated arts agency or, anyone who is associated with the city who is proposing
Agreed.
a public art project.
Yeah. Thank you. Good clarification. Other questions? Okay. So are we in the right direction? And other than, I know we've got some comments from the mayor that we can start working on in that section 3. Would the council be comfortable with us moving some recommendations forward into committee? And then what else do you need?
Any other comments?
Okay.
I think you're moving in the right direction.
That's good.
Okay.
Is there anybody in the public that would like to speak about this?
Thank you very much.
Okay. We'll work on these, and we'll find, with some amendments, we'll work on these for committee when it's appropriate, and get them scheduled.
Perfect.
Thank you so much.
And we are adjourned.